dear chair, dear audience. Let me present my PhD topic, which is about investigating the mortality and the early outcomes of very preterm infants. My name is Vivien Unger. I'm a PhD student at the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, the Semmelweis University, and also a fourth-year pediatric resident in the Csolnoky Ferenc Hospital in Veszprém. My vision is to provide the highest quality of care to the very preterm infants, and for this, my mission is to find the optimal mode of delivery and to provide timely and accurate data about periviable preterms in Hungary. I have two ongoing projects. The first one is a meta-analysis and a systematic review, which is about investigating the relation between the mode of delivery on the mortality and morbidity among extremely and very preterm infants. The second one is a registry analysis based on the periviable infants in Hungary. So let me start with the first one. Approximately 15 million babies born preterm annually worldwide, indicating a global preterm birth rate of about 11%. Very preterm neonates who born before the 32nd gestational week are at high risk for death, medical complications, and neurodevelopmental sequelae. The optimal mode of delivery before this age is still unknown and has been an interesting topic in perinatal medicine. Though cesarean section rates are high for this population, the benefits are still unknown. Let me highlight some of the complications, possible complications arising from C-section: delayed neonatal lung liquid absorption, neonatal gut dysbiosis, and higher risk of maternal morbidities are known risk factors of C-section. Although during prolonged birth asphyxia may occur, which is a known risk factor for intraventricular hemorrhage. Some studies found that C-section might reduce the occurrence of intraventricular hemorrhage. Therefore, our aim is to assess the effects of C-section on the mortality and the morbidity rates. I would like to highlight here two different nomenclature, namely the planned and the actual mode of delivery, because I'm going to use this in the upcoming slides. So planned C-section and planned vaginal birth means that it is planned at the beginning of the labor, although it may turn out that, for example, during vaginal birth, some kind of maternal or fetal comprise happen, and they need to do an emergency C-section. In this case, in the planned vaginal birth group, planned vaginal birth and the emergency C-section cases are going to put together. In case of the actual one, there is no other case, so planned C-section and planned emergency cases are put together. So our clinical question was whether the mode of delivery have an effect on the mortality and the morbidity rates. We are examining preterm infants born before the 32nd gestational week. We are going to compare planned or actual C-section to planned or actual vaginal birth, and to rule out the in-hospital mortality rates and the occurrence of IVH rates and some of the secondary outcomes. According to our hypothesis, among very preterm infants, C-section decreases the mortality and the early morbidities. We ran a systematic search in the last year, November, resulting in 16 articles. So let's see our results. In this plot, we are comparing the effect of planned C-section and planned vaginal birth on the mortality rates. Odds ratio is 0.95, which means that there is no difference between the effect of the two subgroups. I would like to highlight here that if odds ratio is below 1, it means that babies who born via C-section has a lower odds of death than among those babies who born via vaginal birth. In case of odds ratio is above 1, it is despite the previous sentence, so babies who born via vaginal birth have lower odds of death comparing to babies who born via C-section. This is a very heterogeneous population, therefore we made a subgroup analysis based on the parity and the presentation of the babies. Here you can see the analysis based on the presentation of the babies. We investigated here only singleton pregnancies. The first 4 studies investigated breech babies. In this case, odds ratio is 0.56, which means that babies who born via C-section have almost 50% smaller odds of death than among those babies who born via vaginal birth. This is a clinically and a mathematically significant result. Here you can see the subgroup analysis based on the parity. Twins and singleton pregnancies were compared. In case of twin pregnancies, odds ratio is 1.77, which means that among babies who born via vaginal birth has lower odds of death than among those babies who born via C-section. This is a clinically relevant information, although it is at the burden of statistical significance. Now let me move on to the cases of severe intraventricular hemorrhage among cases born by planned mode of delivery. In this case, we found no difference between the two groups. In case, if we analyze the data based on the actual mode of delivery, you can see that we found totally different results. So in case of, if we put together the all grades of intraventricular hemorrhage, so grade 1, 2, 3, 4, we found a significant decrease among the occurrence of intraventricular hemorrhage in cases of babies who born via C-section. In case of severe brain damage, meaning grade 3 and 4 IVH and periventricular leukomalacia, we couldn't find statistically significant result, although these are almost the same as the first ones. To conclude our findings, here you can see a table highlighting the differences to the actual and planned mode of delivery. We found that among singleton, breech, very preterm deliveries, C-section definitely reduces the odds of death, although in case of intraventricular hemorrhage, the planned way of analyzing the data didn't prove statistically significant nor clinically in the two groups. Although if we analyze the data according to the actual mode of delivery, all cases of IVH were smaller among those babies who born via C-section. We could include only a low-risk population articles, which is really important because in some cases of maternal comorbidities such as placenta previa or preeclampsia, there is no way to perform a planned vaginal birth or a vaginal birth. Therefore, our aim was to perform this low-risk analysis, and we could make it. We were able to do a subgroup analysis, although all of our studies were cohort studies, and there were some selection bias arising from the studies as well. To conclude, for breech babies, C-section should be chosen as an optimal mode of delivery, although for twin pregnancies and for singleton vertex cases, further prospective studies are needed to prove whether C-section or vaginal birth have any kind of beneficial aspect. And furthermore, rigorous subgroup analysis needs to be carried on in the further analysis. Here you can see the status of my manuscript. I'm planning to submit and finish it by the end of June. And now let me move on to the second topic, which is a registry analysis based on the characteristics of periviable infants in Hungary. The ability of the fetus, the definition of the limit of viability says that the ability of the fetus is to survive outside the uterus when supported by the most advanced medical care. There has been a change over time in this limit. In the 1980s, it was around the 28th gestational week. Meanwhile, 40 years later, it decreased to the 22nd, 24th gestational week. This definition doesn't consider the chances of survival and the survival's quality of life. Therefore, we need our own timely data to provide for our own healthcare provider, because babies who born during this period meant really big ethical and medical issues. Therefore, we have to know the limit where a preterm baby survives and the survivors have a good quality of life. So we are planning to do a registry analysis based on the Hungarian NICU database. We are going to analyze a 10-year period with 3 subsets, and our aim is to provide timely and accurate data about this very fragile population. According to our hypothesis, in the latter period, we could improve in the management of these babies via reducing the mortality and the morbidity rates. Let me finish my presentation with a quote: "From a little spark may burst a flame." Thank you for your attention.
It's a very, very significant result. In your systematic review, the heaviest outcome parameter of medicine, death, can be avoided through the cesarean session.
Yes.
Of course, it's a long story that preterm infants and cesarean session. What do you know about the current guidelines? What do they say about this?
I've checked the current guidelines. According to WHO, they don't recommend C-section as the first optimum. I'm talking about breech babies now. Nor the British guideline. The British guideline says that only in case of a maternal or fetal comprise should a C-section be performed, and not in the first case. And this is a totally different result, and I would like to highlight that the previous meta-analysis conducted on extremely preterm infants who born before the 28th gestational week, so they are even smaller ones, also found almost the same result. And it was published in 2017, so we almost have the same results.
I was wondering what were the results on the latest meta-analysis in this topic?
Okay, I said the breech ones.
Yes.
In case of twin pregnancies, was published in 2022, they could include only 3 articles and not these ones because they included also high-risk pregnancies. They didn't found a protective factor of C-section. So they conclude that also further prospective analysis are needed, and they didn't say that whether C-section or vaginal birth should be performed.